Hello and welcome to a special coverage and programming on expectations from the budget on what are the hopes from Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. I am Pranjal Sharma. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley and his team have finalized the Union Budget 2018-19 at the ministry today, and present on the occasion were Ministers of State for Finance Shiv Pratap Shukla and P. Radhakrishnan. The last 10 days have seen the printing of the budget at the Finance Ministry. Finance Minister Jaitley will present the NDA government's fifth general budget tomorrow, and it's going to be very significant because this will be the first budget after the rollout of GST in July 1st last year. Expected among the budget proposals tomorrow will be a push for expenditure in the agriculture sector and large infrastructure projects as well. Also expected are a few tax relief and other incentives. Now, we'll be talking about two specific issues in this discussion. We'll talk about taxes and also we'll talk about some of the infrastructure investments, both in economic and social infrastructure. But before we start, let's get introduced to the guests who are joining me in the studio today. Abhinav Prakash is an assistant professor with the Delhi University. K. Badrinath is editor policy with Financial Chronicle. Sanjay Bhutani is managing director Bausch and Lomb India. And also joining us will be Gopal Krishna Agarwal. He is the national spokesperson for BJP. Now let's begin with infrastructure development, which is a prime driver of economic growth. From building roads and bridges to airports and power grids, infrastructure forms the very foundation of any economy, which is why it becomes one of the top priorities of any government. Well, let's talk about infrastructure and spending, but let's also talk about social reforms. Badri, I'd like to begin with you. There has been a huge effort in the last few years with the NDA government under Prime Minister Modi to not just focus on economic growth, but also revive rural health, rural sanitation, to ensure that there is more gender equality. How important is this for the growth of an economy?
See, apart from the economic infrastructure that we have been talking about, before the NDA government came into power in 2014, the focus has taken a subtle shift in favor of, creating social infrastructure, especially in the rural and semi-urban areas where a lot of activity seems to be happening. A lot of conscious effort seems to be made to, on health, education and delivery of services at the grassroots level. Further, a lot of support infrastructure like, banking services, then the non-banking services, and technology is being in a big way leveraged for setting up this social infrastructure.
And schemes like Ujjwala Yojana, where 50 million free gas connections have been promised to be given by 2019, but 30 million have already been given. Now, clearly, that's a very focused attempt.
See, well, the Ujjwala scheme is a runaway success, actually. The simple reason that earlier also some attempt was made by the UPA to get more and more, clean gas connection or clean energy connection to the people in the rural areas. That is a very limited point that we are making. In Ujjwala, there are two things. The social aspect of it is that a larger number of people, millions of people are being covered, number one. Number two, also it involves the pricing reforms, in the sense that the subsidies which were misdirected are being taken away or voluntarily being given up as part of the Ujjwala scheme. So both the targets have been achieved. One, you are going ahead with your economic reform program in terms of pricing. Second is allowing people to move away from the very, very unsustainable kind of a kitchen atmosphere.
Correct.
To
I want to come to Abhinav on this. Abhinav, typically the policy of a government is that, only welfare programs or only focus on supporting investment and what is called, only incentives for industry. But it looks like that this government has tried to, be balanced about the approach, not just ensuring that people get their basic utilities at affordable cost and price, but also the industry benefits. On social sector spending, the spending has not really gone up, but it looks like the focus has been on schemes and implementation. How important will this be for Finance Minister Arun Jaitley?
Well, you are obviously right that our expenditure on the social sector schemes as the part of GDP is 6.5, 6.6%. That's very low by the international. And it has
stayed fairly flat.
Fairly flat over the decades. So, of course, the finance minister has the scope to increase this kind of spending, but I think the focus again will be on, as you said, that more better or targeted implementation of these schemes, like you have rural sanitation. Now, as you talked about, these are not just reforms per se, they also have economic benefits. So, Economic Survey recently pointed out that the rural sanitation alone is leading to saving of around 50,000 per family in a year, and not to talk about the health benefits, because the health benefits, the mortality rate was very high. Where we are lacking exactly is on the investment in the public health sector. So even today, around 62% of the expenditure on the health is out-of-pocket expenditure. And that's one of the largest share in the expenditure of the poor families. So we have lots of scope to improve basically this public health delivery. Well, obviously the delivery of public utilities have improved, like Ujjwala and other things. So even the World Bank Prospect report also pointed out in its report that the improvement in the public utilities and expenditure on this kind of schemes is giving a boost to India's economic growth rate. So we'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow.
True. Sanjay, I want to talk to you about the fact that one of the key fuel for growth in an economy is talent. And one effort has been on Skill India, where it began with the previous government, but it has been refined by this government to ensure that skilling, improvement of talent improves for everybody. You know, there are about plans to have another 1,500 multi-skilling schools. The National Skill Development Corporation under the Skill India program has been making an effort. How would you assess the efforts so far?
So I think the government is going in the right direction. So not only the government, also the private sector is participating to a great extent. So even if you look at Bausch and Lomb, for example, the company where I work, one of the biggest challenge right now is you don't have like enough optometrists in the country. So we have about like 50,000 optometrists in the country. So the private sector is kind of partnering with the schools. We've tied up with about 15 schools where we are educating, and we've till date like educated about 9,000 optometrists to fit in contact lenses, another 10,000 in the plan. So government is putting that effort. Also the private sector is giving that push, where they're investing money either through their...
But has that been enough? Has that been enough from the perspective of industry?
It's like if you look about the optometrists in the country is 0.0025%. And that's the reason like contact lens market is very niche in the country. It's very at the nascent stage. So only like 5%, 6% of the people like wear contact lenses in the country who require vision correction. So that's not enough, but to a extent the kind of money people have to spend, I think.
But you also have to make an effort on making eye care more affordable as part of the overall health plan. That is something which will be important effort where both industry and government have to come together.
Correct. So you have like products which are very affordable, and also in the premium segment, depending on the requirement, like what people require.
Right. Let me come to Gopal Krishna Agarwal, who is National Spokesperson BJP. He has joined us. Gopalji, we've been talking about the focus on infrastructure, both social infrastructure, social welfare schemes, as well as economic infrastructure. Now, a lot of interesting numbers have been thrown up by the Economic Survey. If you look at ODF, open defecation free areas, we have seen much improvement. The use of rural toilets has really increased at 74% of the household, and of that the usage itself is 91%. While the government has been talking about economic development, social development has also been a big effort. How would you say that is this something which is now satisfying the government and is NDA and BJP happy about the effort taken by the government?
Definitely one important aspect on which PM Modi had been focusing is that there was a large scale leakages in the delivery mechanism, and whatever social security schemes government was targeting, they were not going to the actual targeted person. There was quite distribution in that. So those leakages in the delivery mechanism and targeted delivery has been fully put in place with Jan Dhan account and direct benefit transfer. Now whatever resources government spends, they will go to the right person. That was an important area, so that leakages have been now plugged. So
but is it how far how much of success has been achieved? I mean, it's a great direction, great effort, but do you think there's still more work to be done on that front, because leakages are still occurring?
No, but the delivery of the social security scheme has to be more targeted. But as far as leakages is concerned, as more and more schemes comes under Jan Dhan account and direct benefit transfers, that leakages will automatically be plugged in. But what is important in the economic survey, as you have mentioned, there is a whole chapter which tells how Jan Dhan account has benefited the common man. It tells about the women, gender equality, how 40% of the Jan Dhan account are held by women, and how that will empower that. Then there are so many issues, schemes, etc., which are not which require a mass movement, like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Those are schemes which require the support and mass movement from the common man. But ultimately, government, if the social security has to go to the remote areas, it is through the infrastructure. The government has focused on Pradhan Mantri Gramin Sadak Yojana. These are the important areas where this infrastructure in the rural and village areas are created, that will benefit common man, that will benefit the geographical areas, that will benefit the remote areas.
That's an important point,
Gramin Sadak Yojana, housing, low cost housing, power to every village, and then in addition to power to every village, then going to the individual houses with electricity. So these infrastructure etc. will also benefit the common man, and irrigation area under irrigation is also targeted to be doubled by
you're right, there's a great effort to not just focus on the farm sector, but also creating opportunities in the rural economy. Abhinav, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, one point which is missing is that the government has taken lots of steps to promote the entrepreneurship amongst the Dalits and the tribals in this country. So you have lots of schemes which have been launched, like the Venture Capital Fund for SC and STs, the Mudra Bank is there. So when we talk about the social infrastructure, we normally tend to focus only on health and education mostly. Those are extremely important. And
I mean, you know, in rural toilet and sanitation, that's important, because health is important if you want them to be able workers.
Yeah, because the absence of proper sanitation in the country was costing the life of 1 lakh children every year, and 48% of the children were stunted. So by doing this kind of thing, it's not the traditional way of doing social welfare or creating the traditional thing, but the government has been very innovative, more targeted. But yeah, I would say the much more needs to be done, because the task is enormous and we have to definitely increase our expenditure on it.
Badri?
Yeah, there are 2 points that I would like to make about the Jan Dhan Yojana accounts that Mr. Agarwal was talking about. Opening the accounts alone will not help. There's a lot desired to be done. Of course, there might have been a lot of effort done to open the accounts, but are they being put to use? And if they are being put to use, how much is it being put to use? This because the finance minister had provided for, zero balance accounts and all that.
Correct.
But then even after that, what are we doing with those accounts apart from providing the government cash subsidies into these accounts?
But one of the figures that the economic survey has shown is that the number of zero balance accounts as a percentage has reduced to about 10% from a very high percentage earlier. So again, there is, you're absolutely right, there is an effort.
Zero balance account, this Jan Dhan account has also increased to more than 70,000 crores. So there, and the government is now campaigning for that renewal of insurance through these accounts. Even the credit limit of 5,000, which was available in those Jan Dhan account, has been increased now. So more and more accounts are being used, put into use by the government for social security, for their credit availability, for their insurance purposes, and more people are using those accounts for putting up their savings. And
right. So Gopalji, I'll just let Badri complete his point and come to Sanjay.
Yeah, the issue here is, yes, you have provided a insurance cover, the accident cover, the life cover, and things like that. The point here is that how effective are these accounts at all? You don't just keep the money in those accounts and forget about it, even if it is 20,000 crores. This is not perhaps the idea of why we have the Jan Dhan accounts at all. The second issue is perhaps we need to go a step further. Perhaps the finance minister may have to roll out some measures tomorrow to see that these Jan Dhan Yojana accounts.
So what could that measure be? What would you suggest that finance minister do?
Say for instance, the point here is that Mr. Agarwal was talking about providing credit against these account balances.
Correct.
How much of the rural credit has come in through these accounts? Linking the rural credit with these accounts should be the biggest challenge. And this will also push up your, the rotation of money in the rural area and the flow of funds in the rural economy. So, leaving the money there or having zero accounts in itself should not be the objective or target.
Sanjay?
So, I would agree with Badri. I think that's the step taken for the insurance from the government is a small step in a right direction. I was reading the World Bank report in 2014. I think 89% of the healthcare spends in the country is private pay. So the government really needs to increase the healthcare spend. It's about like 3 to 4% right now. So which we expect needs to go up. So that's
but you think from your perspective, financial inclusion of bringing so many new people in the financial mainstream, about 300 new accounts which have been opened, has that made also a difference in creating a new consuming class? Which is, consumer demand is the bedrock of any economy.
Right. No, that's there. So that's what I said. Like it's the step in the right direction, but lot needs to be done there. The public spending needs to go up from the government.
Abhinav, Badri, you want to add to this?
Point here is financial inclusion is the larger objective here, and no doubt that this scheme has worked wonders. The point here I am trying to make is that if you think that financial inclusion has to be achieved, then weaning away these rural women or men away from the money lenders who fleece them is the biggest issue. If that needs to be achieved, then more social and economic reforms in the rural sector need to happen, and perhaps you need to have a larger strategy for doing this. Otherwise, Jan Dhan accounts alone may not, be the end of all kind of a situation.
Gopalji, would you like to add to this?
I think some of the concerns are being put here. That has been very well clearly pointed out in the economic survey. There are 3 areas where the economic survey that says that the government has to focus. There was a good macroeconomic parameters with inflation, etc., fiscal deficits and current account reserves. This foreign exchange reserves are good. But these 3-4 areas have been pointed out, and government like agriculture sector distress, the employment generation, education, health, skilling, these 3-4 areas have been pointed out, and Prime Minister and Finance Minister has said that in this budget these areas will be focused for agriculture and rural economy. The government want to shift focus from merely production based agriculture growth to income based growth from at the farmers level. There are expected to be several initiatives where income at the level of the farmers will be increased. That's very important. Their risk mitigation, etc., right, for insurance, and their price available, the infrastructure with warehousing, all will be there, and education and health. is an important area where there has been very low spend in the budget in previous years across the after independence. It requires much more focused investment. Government has got a healthy growth in the direct tax collection. Even the government expect good tax collection in the indirect form also, with higher compliance and reduced tax evasion and better delivery. So government will definitely focus on these areas and deliver on these areas with regard to employment, education, health. These
Correct.
are important areas.
This as you can see on your screens, the health expenditure has dipped a bit, but the expenditure on education has improved. Badri and Abhinav, I'd like to come to you on education. The investment in human capital, as we call it, is absolutely critical. But while the institutions have been expanded, perhaps the talent which will run this is still missing.
Two issues are there in education and healthcare. One, absenteeism of teachers across schools in the country, especially in the rural areas, is the biggest problem. Second, the absence of doctors at the primary healthcare center is the biggest issue confronting our villagers. So for this, there is a suggestion. Actually, the Ministry of Education, I mean, the Department of Education, HRD Ministry had put together a proposal saying that you need to tackle this by leveraging technology in terms of, say, for example, there is a village where you don't have a teacher. There is a GPS monitored system that can be put in place, where you know whether the teacher is going there and teaching there or not, whether it is going to the primary healthcare center or not.
So the use of technology for plugging these leaks and removing absenteeism is also what Gopalji had referred to earlier, that perhaps the use of Aadhaar also and biometrics has also helped in that. Abhinav, would you want to comment on this?
Well, I agree to this point that there is large-scale absenteeism. But I just give you an example. One of my colleagues, she went and joined the Patna college in Bihar, and she came back, resigned from her job because she said there is no infrastructure, there is no place to sit even. So while we are talking about this technology and biometrics and everything, first thing we need to focus is to actually create infrastructure on ground that is absent. We have to accept that.
You're talking about the physical infrastructure.
Physical infrastructure itself is absent. Once you have that, only then you can go with this high technological based approach.
Sanjay, can there be a role for private sector in this?
Private sector is playing a role already. You have currently, if you look at the healthcare, so 60 to 70% is like private health, where people are like putting money in and creating hospitals. But on the public side, the expenditure needs to go up. As Abhinav pointed out, the friend went to Patna and there is no infrastructure even to sit. So why would people, like after qualifying, maybe becoming a doctor, would like to go to these places?
Gopalji, here I think the states also have to contribute. So investing in physical infrastructure plus incentivizing or at least creating accountability of the people, the professionals either in healthcare or education to deliver what they are being paid a salary for. I think that remains a governance issue.
Yeah, definitely. And what the problem in the federal structure that has been coming out in the front of the government is that the last mile connectivity on majority of social security schemes or delivery to the common man comes, the larger part has comes from the state government. The last mile connectivity is for the state government, and therefore government at present under the 14th Finance Commission and had tried to transfer more resources to them without any tied up schemes, so that they are free to spend in which activity they find more beneficial for the common man of their states. So this is one issue the government is trying to tackle. Ultimately, government is also trying to incentivize state. There has been a competitive federalism where states are also being judged according to ranked according to their ease of business, ease of availability of infrastructure, etc. So government is trying to create some competition between the states so that there is a better delivery mechanism. And economic survey also tells that those states which have higher share in the export, their quality of life is better with regard to comparing to other states. So economic development is one area where if there is a strong economic development and the government creates infrastructure through that economic development activity, the quality of life on these areas will improve. But we have to look into better infrastructure in the rural and agriculture sector.
So there
the focus is there.
Absolutely. So it's also about construction growth, because that's a great way to mobilize the economic stimulus in the country. We'll take a quick comment from Badri and Abhinav, and then I want to move on our discussion to taxation
two
changes.
Things which clearly come out as: one, the states have a primary responsibility of delivering the last mile services. But then most of the state governments today are controlled by his party, sir. Let's not forget, more than 20 states, you have a BJP government or an alliance government there. So my guess is this is the best opportunity for the India as a country to, for a complete synchronization of activities between the center and state.
That's a great point. So I think you were our team was showing us the figures on construction industry and how that has evolved. Abhinav, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, exactly. The one thing we have to realize that the public sector sets the minimum standard even for the private sector. So it's not private sector versus public sector. Once you have a good functioning public sector, right, in health and education, that keeps the minimum bar for the private sector to perform. So you have private sector in health and education in India in a big way, but even they are not very efficient, not very cost
It's a matter of scale. So now let's now move to the next part of our discussion and take a look at what are the expectations and what hopes can we have on direct taxes. Well, the goods and services tax rollout has given a new dimension to the economy, and this budget will be the first after the rollout of GST. Now, the government says its implementation has increased indirect taxpayer base by more than 50%, with 34 lakh businesses coming into the tax net. And also, for the first time, the economic survey has included data on international exports. And the GST is allowing the government to get such fantastic data, allowing the policymakers to get a better picture, where states are now drawing a strong correlation between export performance and the standard of living. The survey further says that the growth in savings did not bring economic growth, but the growth in investment has made a big difference.
कि जीएसटी से हम लोगों को काफ़ी फ़ायदा होने वाला है, क्योंकि उसमें 50% बढ़ोतरी हुई है इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स के रजिस्ट्रेशन में. तो आप इससे अंदाज़ा लगा सकते हैं कि आने वाले सालों में हमारा इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स की रेवेन्यू कितनी ज़्यादा और बढ़ जाएगी.
So clearly, GST, let's take a look at also the figures on GST. Things have really been transformed on the ground, and that rollout and impact is still being seen. The GST figures, if you look, it opened with a bang. It sort of slid down. It went to a low in November, but it is now on a upward trend. Badri, I'd like to come to you. You've seen India's fiscal situation for almost or more than 3 decades now. How much of this collection which is coming through can be adding more energy to the economy?
See, let me take you back a decade or two back. When the value-added tax was introduced, also, we went through a lot of turbulation. VAT, SENVAT and VAT. Then also, first 3 years was a phase of turbulence and stabilization. That was one issue. Perhaps the same cycle is getting repeated now, just now, after the rollout of GST in July 1 last year. Number one. Number two, my guess is the GST will get stabilized somewhere around 90,000 crores to 1 lakh crores a year. I mean, every month, which is apportioned between the states and the center and that kind of stuff. And integrated GST money will have to be set aside for other purposes. So these 3 issues are there, number one. Number two, I was just watching the video clip of the Niti Aayog chief, Rajiv Kumar, old friend of ours. He talks about 50% increase in the number of the accounts that have been opened and all that. No doubt GST is a big rollout and a big issue. But how many of these accounts are going to give you taxes is the biggest issue. because most of them are marginal players.
So let me ask
Very
Gopal
small.
ji to respond to this. Gopal ji, what is the assessment?
What important thing on the GST is the GST whole system of GST is based on technological driven. We have come a long way from implementation of VAT to the current technology that is available. The beauty of GST is GST network. Once that is stabilized, the whole process of registration, returns, assessment, refund will be online, transparent, and it is creating an audit trail. That's most important. Whether you pay GST or not is not important. The whole business activity or business transaction is moving through an audit trail, and as PM at Davos had said, the data is the new gold mine, where we will have lot of data which it can be analyzed, assessed, and then tax evasion, compliance, etc. will increase. That has been the process through which after demonetization we moved, and direct tax collection figures have jumped by 19%. Similarly, we expect there will be more compliance, more ease of doing business, and revenue tax evasion will be controlled, and government will have more revenue.
So, you know,
that's very important.
Gopalji, the hope now is that with more money coming into the coffers of the government, the impact on direct taxes, income tax slabs for individual taxpayers, there could be some relief. Abhinav, do you expect some changes here? Is there enough elbow room for the finance minister to give some further relief? Because, you know, he would want to, after the pain of GST, he would want to give some kind of a relief to individual income taxpayers.
Well, as far as GST is concerned, the finance minister can't do anything about it because that's the work of the GST council.
Correct.
As far as the direct taxes are concerned, there may be some concessions, some tinkering with the slabs, but I don't think that the government is going to give lots of concessions, because first, you have to meet your physical deficit target. The second, you have lots of commitment on the expenditure side still. You have overspended this year anyways. So we might see some tinkering with the slabs. But yeah, I agree with Gopalji when he says that the GST will get stabilized very soon because of the technological thing. And as far as people not paying taxes, at least we have got them for the first time. We have registered them. So we will see this base effect playing out in the coming year.
But fiscal deficit remains a challenge. So the question then again is that you're saying that there is not enough room because of the fiscal deficit targets for the government to give any concessions to individual taxpayers or anything on direct taxes?
No, we might see some tinkering with the slabs, and that's a far cry, but there's a long-standing demand from the corporate sector to reduce the corporate taxes. But whether that will happen this year is something to be seen tomorrow.
So minimum alternate tax as well as the tax on dividend. Sanjay, would you like to respond to this?
Maybe a couple of points here. I think GST is the step in the right direction, but I don't think like it would take about 3 years, because when VAT was implemented, the kind of IT infrastructure we have today was not available then. So my guess is it would take about like 4 cycles, which is like 4 quarters. So hopefully, I think by July 2018, it should stabilize. So that's the right direction where.
Which is not a long time in the economy,
it's about
economic turnaround.
Years time. So that's my thought. But it's quite a complex GST. So if you look at like countries like Singapore, where you got just one GST rate, 7%. So here you've got maybe 6 different rates. You have got exempt category of 0, 5, 12, 18, 28.
But you know, in the economic survey, and after that, the chief economic advisor has said that in a couple of years, the slab rates could reduce to 2 or 3. So that's clearly a direction that the government is working on. But from the industry point of view, from the company point of view, how do you see the impact on consumption and demand? Because there is now in many categories, the rate has come down, and it looks like the market for the industry is going to be less complex, it's going to be smoother, especially from the ease of doing business. You don't have multiple tax markets to worry about. Will that make a difference from your point of view?
Whatever I have experienced, I think the tax rates have gone up. It's not gone down. I was listening to the Honorable Finance Minister after the GST was implemented. So what he said, like the CVD was 5%, sorry 6%, 5% was VAT, and 2% authorized overall tax was 13%. but you pay CVD on an import price,
Right.
and then you pay VAT on what the company is billing to a distributor. So the embedded tax rates were much lower. So for example, like in medical devices, the embedded tax rate was where the finance minister was quoting about 13% is actually
Right.
like 7.5%. So from 7.5%, it's gone up.
So
to
some of
12%.
these anomalies have to be addressed,
Correct.
what you're saying. But I want to come back to the issue of personal tax. Gopalji, you want to
I just
respond
want
to
to
this?
add one brief point on investment and government expenditure. There is ample resources with the government. There are lot of money parked with the PSUs, which the government will use to invest for and catalyze the economic growth. At the same time, even you see in the railways, we have got a very loan from 1 lakh crore from the Japan for bullet train. There now today only that ADB Asian Development Bank has tied up with the government for rural infrastructure to the tune of 25,000 crore. Government has surpassed its target with regard to disinvestment. So there are ample resources.
So,
and
you know,
there
therefore
will
my
be
question, my question, Gopalji,
pressure on the fiscal prudence. I think consolidation of fiscal debt, fiscal consolidation will not be at a height, and government has resources to develop infrastructure.
Exactly. But so my question to you is that you as an individual taxpayer, and there are several categories of taxpayers like senior citizens who are expecting some kind of a relief, individual honest taxpayers who've always been supportive of the government's effort to bring more transparency in their tax structure. They supported the government's plan on demonetization. Would you then request the finance minister to give some kind of a tax relief to individuals and different categories of individuals, students, senior citizens, professionals? Is that something that you would also ask for?
No, I think there is every case for increasing the exemption tax slab initial. That's because of the salaried employee or lower income groups. Generally, they do not contribute a lot to the tax slab, but tax collection, but they have to pay. They have to be given benefit out of it. Otherwise, the government at present is focusing on reduction of indirect tax. The indirect tax, which were to the tune of 25 to 30% average, and highest slab was 28%. That has been brought. Most of the items have been brought down from 28% to 18 and 12%, and government want to converge on 2 rates, maximum 3 rates, and lower tax in the case of indirect tax. So if indirect tax is reduced, all common man, every citizen of the country gets benefited. So I think beyond that, reduction in tax slabs in direct taxes is not expected much. There some quarters were even asking for increasing the tax rate, but I don't think the government will go for any increase in the tax rate. Ultimately, indirect tax will be the focus area.
I think you have given enough statements for all of our colleagues to respond to that. I'll come quickly to Sanjay and then go along.
So Gopalji, I have a different view. I think the direct personal taxes, even the corporate taxes, should go down. So 2 things. One is if the tax rate goes down, the more would come into compliance, and it would further kind of widen the tax base. So one side, like the indirect taxes, needs to come down. Also the personal income taxes and the corporate taxes needs to come down as well.
Right.
So if I was just like doing back of the envelope calculation, if you are in a salary bracket of where you pay like 20% tax, and if you're buying a product which is 18% GST, you actually pay about like 47% tax. And if you are buying a product which is 28% GST, the effective tax rate is about 77%. And if you are into 30% tax bracket, you actually pay like over 90% as the taxes. And I'm just not counting the custom duty here. So if you take
so
the
that's a
custom
good point.
duty
That,
into account,
if you reduce,
people
and
would
we
be
had
paying
been
like
discussing,
over
the more you reduce, the wider the basis.
Only 24 lakh people are in the higher tax slabs. So the tax compliance at present is not very efficient in the system, and I don't think many people who are in the higher slabs is a very little number that is paying the higher.
Right. So I'll get a reaction from Abhinav and then Badri.
Yes, as Gopalji was saying, that one thing to watch in this budget will be the non-tax revenue of the government, and because they don't have a power to change the indirect taxes. And other thing is that there are lots of expenditure which will be done by government on the infrastructure, which will basically come from off the budget sources. Like I was talking about loans and other things. So we have to watch these two things carefully. What direction did the government takes regarding these two things?
So what do you expect on that?
On the taxes, I don't think they're going to increase the taxes. As far as the lowering the tax is concerned, they might give to the middle class some exemption, like they may increase the exemption limit. But I don't think apart from that much is going to change in the taxation.
Badri?
Last year, if you recall, the lower tax slab, there was a marginal reduction in the tax liability payable by people falling in the tax bracket of 2.5 to 5 lakh annual income people. Right. But before that, more or less, the 3 tax slabs have been settled. The 4th slab that was done was for the super rich or high income kind of a category, which has been set aside. My guess is there is a case for rejigging the tax slabs. Well, if he talks about there is a lot of money with the government and the resources is not a constraint, perhaps the finance minister should go ahead and do the rejigging of the tax slab. He has to revamp the tax slab.
Also remembering the fact that this is the last full budget of this current government.
And it's politically saleable. It's politically saleable package, number one. Number two, as you were saying earlier, during all the painful days of GST rollout as well as demonetization, this is a class that has stood behind the NDA government solidly, irrespective of the provocations otherwise.
So there is a thank you note expected?
No, one point I want to like to mention is direct tax is never considered to be for resources or direct tax is only considered to equalize the inequalities in the distribution system in the income generated. It is the indirect tax which affects the common man. So our government's major focus at present is to reduce indirect taxes and through GST make it efficient with regard to non-compliances. So at present there is no big case for reduction in tax slabs. With regard to corporate taxes, the government had promised that corporate taxes will come down, but the exemption, various exemptions which they were enjoying will have to be removed from the system. So that is just a balancing thing, but that will the government will definitely look into. But the case with regard to reduction in the rate at present in the direct tax at the higher slab is, I don't think is much on the card.
Another issue which is worrying individuals as investors is the dividend tax. Abhinav, if I can come to you on that, the argument for dividend tax and how it's not hurting, it's hurting investment. As it is, the options for investment and savings for individuals are limited, and with this, in some ways, you're putting a double burden. Do you think there is scope for the finance minister to address this problem?
Well, I'd say because there's lots of uncertainty regarding the tax collections this year, because you just implemented GST. So I don't think that they're going to change that, but obviously there's a case for reducing that tax, if not abolishing it. But I don't see that happening this budget at least.
Badri?
But I have a slightly different view on this. Unless you put more money in the hands of the consumers, unlike China, which is export-led growth, today ours is a domestic consumption-led growth. I disagree with the chief economic advisor when he says that savings are not going to affect growth. So point here is savings as well as more money with the people is going to push up consumption. If you want to have double-digit growth that you are talking about, even before you go to elections next time, my guess is you need to give more and more tax concessions to the most vociferous consumers which are there, and my guess is that is going to push up growth and spread prosperity, and it will also kick up the industrial activity. Industrial activity is going to be kicked up only because of consumption. If there is no consumption demand, what is it going to happen? Okay, you're fine with whatever are the tax slabs. But then unless you leave more money in the hands of the people, the consumption cycle will not pick up.
What do you think, Sanjay?
Yeah, Pranjal, coming to absolutely, like you need to put more disposable income with the people. Then only like the consumption would
But
go up.
How is the consumer sentiment?
Consumer sentiment, like people are expecting reduction in tax rates, specifically because the GST tax rates are much higher. If you compare with some of the countries, like Hong Kong has got highest tax slab of 15% and they have no custom duty, no GST. Singapore maximum is 22% with 7% GST. So unless you put like more disposable income into hands of people, the consumption would not go up. So that was one point. Second, coming back to the corporate tax side, as Gopalji was mentioning, the government has already promised from 30% would move to about 25% in 5 years' time. In 2016, I think the tax rate went down from 30 to 29% for companies having revenue of less than 5 crores. And also any new manufacturing setup who is not claiming any incentive or deduction would get like 25% tax. In 16-17, the limit went up to like 50 crores.
Right.
But now it needs to be done for everyone. If people are not claiming deductions or any incentives, the tax rate should be to 25%.
Badri, you want to respond?
Specifically, like one more point.
Yeah.
Looking at US kind of reducing the tax rate from 35 to 21%, the investments to the country would kind of, maybe I don't know what would happen. This morning I was reading a newspaper, Apple kind of committing about $350 billion over next 5 years in the US for which would...
So quick response from you, Badri, and I want to go to Gopalji.
The demand for corporate tax cut has been there, and the finance minister has already given a roadmap for that. In 3 years, he has to bring it down to 25%. But my guess is he will not be able to fast track, though US and Japan have cut the tax rates in a big way. But my suspicion is also because, you have the elbow room is limited.
So he may need another couple of years before attempting such cuts.
By 2019, he should be able to do it. And in between 1 year, he took a, he took a, holiday for, in the cut in the tax rate. The point I'm trying to make is that this was the phase of transition. So I guess that US and Japan have cut the tax rate. My guess is we will reach somewhere there in a year or two. And also it's a fact that you cannot give away everything because the oil prices are going up in a big way. Right. And you have a huge pressure on your fisc.
We have a lot of response coming in from our viewers, Gopalji, and I have to now ask you again about the issue of personal income tax, especially, if you look at senior citizens, because they feel that they need some support from the government, and there is a lot of noise about improved revenues. Is there a pressure from the party on the government to give some relief to these sections of individual taxpayers?
I think the pressure from the party or on the government is more to look into the increase in income with the farmers and agriculture sector. That's the most important sector which there is a strong stress, and with more focus of the government shifting from agriculture growth, from merely considering agriculture growth through increase in production to increasing the income of the farming sector. More than 50-60% of our population is dependent on agriculture, and if there is more money in their hand, automatically there will be more money in the consumptions in the hand of consumers. That itself will catalyze the economic growth. So and government
it seems
there is not much case with regard to reduction in direct tax cases. Government is doing everything because ultimately under GST government has promised to compensate the state government for 5 years with a 14% increase every year. That already a big liability on the central government. There are requirements, as Badrinath has said, that oil, petroleum prices rise in international market is also a concern. So, and there are, we want to spend more on education, health, then skilling. All these issues require a lot of resources.
Right. What the consensus which is emerging is that while the government has improved its revenues, the elbow room is there, but it is not likely to be spent on relief on income tax, because perhaps that could be postponed by a couple of years. Is that what you would agree, Abhinav?
Yeah, exactly, because if it were a normal year that we did not have GST rolling out or other things happening, we might have expected this thing to happen. And already the Prime Minister himself has said this is not going to be the Lok Lubhavan budget. So we don't see much tax cuts happening in this budget at least.
So would you also agree, Badi, that it will not be a populist budget? When you say not Lok Lubhavan means
it may not be a
populist
budget in the sense of what Abhinav had been saying it, but my suspicion is even from the economic sense, if the economy has to roll on, then the consumer is the king here. If consumer is the king, you put more money in his hands. And most finance ministers, right from Pranab Mukherjee to the first budget in the 90s, to Yashwant Sinha, to Arun Jaitley, always the the target has been to leave more money in the hands of the people.
Effectively, what you're saying is that while business sentiment and investment sentiment is up, entrepreneurship, the animal spirits are coming back, which is a very welcome sign. Consumer sentiment still needs some effort. Sanjay and Abhinav, would you agree?
Absolutely. So unless you put like more disposable income, post like demonetization and GST implementation, the consumer sentiment is kind of down, and the sales is kind of not growing as expected. So we need to do something there.
Abhinav?
Well, consumer sentiments are obviously not picking up as strongly as they should have been by now. So while the argument makes sense that you have to put more disposable income in the hands of the people, but what we are discussing is the possibility of that happening this year. So I don't see much scope in that, at least for this year.
Right. So we have just about a couple of minutes left to end this discussion. So let me toss this final question to all our guests in the studio. There's also this narrative about ease of living, how it's not just about ease of doing business, but ease of living for all of us. I'll come to each of you and ask you, what do you think could Finance Minister Arun Jaitley do to improve the ease of living? Gopalji, I'll begin with you.
I think the quality of infrastructure requires a lot of improvement. The infrastructure with regard to smart cities, infrastructure with regard to housing, infrastructure with availability of power. There has been a very focused work from the government on these three issues: rural roads, connectivity, air connectivity, water connectivity, air connectivity to the remote small towns, and smart cities, houses, low cost housing, etc. The government is doing for that quality. With the increase in quality of infrastructure, quality of living will definitely go up.
Right.
That's very important aspect that I consider for improvement in quality of
and Sanjay,
living.
if I turn to you, clearly with the business you are in, you would expect that people would like to have rose-tinted glasses?
Right. So my take on maybe, I think as Gopalji was mentioning, on infrastructure improvement, primarily I think the roads. So it takes me like about 2 hours, one side every day to reach office. It's like 25 kilometers.
Right. So I think quality of roads, but also I think
so that would improve,
improving the situation in cities, which is the effort under smart cities. Abhinav, what do you think about ease of living?
Well, I think they have to improve what you say the public delivery system in the country, and you have to focus a lot on the urban areas now, because there's lots of migration from the rural to the urban areas, and you have the semi-urban areas also coming in. So obviously the public delivery, the roads as well, those infrastructure as well, but also the delivery of electricity, the delivery of gas cylinders, and also delivery of the health and education, because that really accounts for lots of expenditure of the people.
Badri?
See, in the case of rural India, it should be the physical and social infrastructure. In the case of urban India, mostly where you're all employed, you're already making a living, it is more money in the hands of the people that is going to push up the economic cycle in a big way.
Thank you so much to all of you for joining in this very vibrant discussion, and the hopes are high, and hopefully the consumer sentiment will match improved business sentiment, and ease of living as the government has promised will look definitely better when we talk about it 24 hours later. Thank you so much for joining us.